Hits and Crits.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another Season 5 review video. Today, we're going to look at Targs, Fire and Blood. And I'm really happy to have Randall with me today. Randall, how are you doing?
Great, Dennis. Thanks for inviting me back. It's an exciting time for Targs, I think, and happy to be here to discuss the changes.
Absolutely. This time the roles are a bit reversed. I was a guest before on the Imperial Minis channel. This time Randall is a guest, is my guest, or I'm a host. If you haven't subscribed or checked out the Imperial Minis channel, please do this. And other than that, let's dive into Targaryens, and we're going to look at the changes. So, first thing we're going to talk about real quick is where does the faction come from? So what was the situation? What was the status quo before the update? Randall, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so the faction was getting better. You know, the faction a couple of patches ago was in a really bad spot, I would say, and Simon has been making some progressively kind of better changes to the faction. In the last version of the game, I would say the faction was kind of middling, it was kind of around the middle, but it was still being held up a lot, I think, by Drogo, Commander Khal Drogo. The Screamer change really boosted the faction a lot, and then just kind of a sprinkling of dragons in there. So I would say the faction was still, in the last patch, it was still a pretty decent spot, but for me, it was feeling a little bit stale. A little bit one-dimensional, so I'm happy to see some changes in this patch.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So we were all excited to see some of those changes, especially some of the commanders. And that's where we actually did get some changes on commanders and their tactics card. One really small change that I want to just talk about before we dive into is Sun Retreat. The wording was just changed a little bit so that the card targets. And so that means it targets a unit, and you are now able to cancel it with some abilities. For example, with if you have a mirror match, a Barristan influence, you could cancel Sudden Retreat because it targets the unit that does the retreat. So this is really just a minor change. And now we're going to the good stuff. The Reign of Dragons. Let's look at the Mother of Dragons, who got a serious buff. All right. Randall, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So Dany, Mother of Dragons, she got an order now. So she previously just had the Mother of Dragons innate ability, but now she gets Threaten. So with Threaten, it kind of increases her own unit's defensive profile a little bit by weakening units that she's fighting with, but it also allows her to project some defensive ability to her other units. So importantly for her, she can throw a weakened on the target that her dragons might be fighting, or onto a unit that might be fighting one of her dragons. So to me, this ability is best used in kind of a defensive way when with her dragons. So this is a boost to me. This is a boost to her dragon survivability. So I think it's a really good addition for her.
Yeah, absolutely. The other Daenerys commander unit, the Queen of Marine, also got this change update before. So I think this was kind of a no-brainer to give her that, because she's kind of doing the same thing. She's going to be in a similar bunker unit that probably will be more defensive and not be very movable, being infantry. So having that is really helpful for that unit to be able to dish out some Threaten, even though it might not do a lot of stuff itself for a while.
Yeah, that's definitely a good addition. It makes the two Daeneryses a little bit samey, I would say, but it is definitely very useful in the Mother Dragons build. So it's nothing to complain about at all.
Yeah. But she has very different tactics card from that Queen of Marine version. And one of the tactics cards that got changed, and it looks like a really minor change, but I think it's very impactful, is Fire Made Flesh. The top part of the card did not get changed. It was very good and powerful before, keeping the dragons alive. But the lower part got changed. Targaryen commanders have 4 different tactic cards instead of the 3 for the other factions. So what happens is with the commander, you need to take out one of the base tactics cards. And before this update, it was Overrun that you would take out. Now it's Field Control. What's your take?
I think this is huge. Like for me, this is one of the biggest changes for Mother Dragons in this patch. So whenever the few times I've played Mother Dragons, which I don't play it too often because I'm kind of going on a tangent a little bit, but like locally, I don't play it a lot because it's kind of a little bit of a feels bad list if you're playing folks kind of outside of a tournament setting, if you're just brutalizing them with dragons. So I don't play Mother Dragons too much locally. But losing Overrun just feels like your list is just a little bit more limp than your usual Targaryen list. You know, that Overrun in the base tactics deck just feels so much of like a signature card for Targaryens that losing it always just felt kind of bad. So now, you know, really the leash has been taken off a little bit of the dragons in this list, and now they can just do some, you know, ridiculous, crazy ping ponging between the enemy lines. So I think it's a really great change.
Yeah, absolutely. And this card is something that people now, you know, playing against Targaryen and Mother of Dragons really need to be aware of and need to be afraid of, really. As you said, the dragons have been let loose. And they can not only charge a unit after killing something, but they can also march with the change in Overrun now. So even if you don't have line of sight to a target after killing something, you can just march and then you're right behind enemy lines in the back of something. So very, very good change for Mother of Dragons. All right, we're going to move on and look at some more of her tactic cards. And we have Fire Made Flesh here. And Fire Made Flesh we just talked about, I mean. So we just put the 3 cards again here, just so you have an overview of those 3 cards that have been changed. Next up is Dracarys. It only got a small change. The wording is the same except for the word short that was changed into long. So now this works in long range. And I think this is a really, really good change. When you have such a defensive bunker for Daenerys somewhere in the middle and your dragons need to move and they're at the edge of the battlefield, you will not use this card. And it's a very, very strong card. Giving dragons another attack is exactly what you want. And now within long range, that's much, much more easy to produce. And the dragons can make those extra attacks, and Daenerys having something like a pikeman unit or something that is not that dangerous when it attacks, maybe it can just sit there and let the dragons do an attack instead of their activation. So I think this is a really good change. It brings it a little more in line with something like issue commands. Luckily for everyone except Targs, it's not issue commands, so they cannot activate and then do a charge or something terrible like that. But they can do a melee attack. And before, in short range, it was much harder. All right. I think we can move on to Promise of Fire. Now, that's an interesting change. Randall, what do you think?
Yeah, so this used to be Daenerys's victory point card, and all the victory point cards were changed in this patch, which is great. And we'll talk about all the other ones as we go. But this one used to have strings attached, and it never really felt useful unless you played it on against a unit that was about to die to a dragon anyway. So now this card attaches to a unit, and it guarantees you're going to roll a 3 for a dragon attack against that unit, which means this unit is always going to be taking max dragon damage. And then the card amplifies if you have multiple dragons attacking a unit. So, you know, if you're ganging up on a unit, this card really just almost spells instant death for anything, especially if you throw this on a solo unit like a mountain that rides, or you know, like a Varamir or something like that. You throw this on them, if a dragon so much as sneezes at them, they're going to just disintegrate. So I think this is a much better card now.
And I think scary is a word for this commander now. So that really works. And it is very scary and off-putting because what we talked about earlier before this video is it kind of acts as a denial card as well, right? Because you get to use or get to attach it to a unit when an enemy NCU activates and claims a zone. So your opponent is able to circumvent having a card attached to a unit until the end of the game by just not claiming a zone with that NCU. So they could just pass, right? They activate, you play the card, they can pass. And that's it. But that's good too, because you get to deny swords or some other important card or bags if something was already attacked by a dragon or whatever and wants to heal. So very flexible and gives you a lot of control. And I think that fits the commander and the playstyle really, really well. And again, scary. All right, let's move on. There's some more tactics cards we want to talk about, and now we switch the commanders. And we have another scary commander, and that's Khal Drogo. And you said before that he's one of the strongest commander, has been probably the strongest and most popular commander before. And now his Adrivat changed in line with the other tactics cards that granted victory points before. So all of those we are going to talk about in the next slides are going to be about that. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't have too much to say about this one. It's good that the downside of the victory point, the victory point cards always were kind of double, like dual edged. They could come back to bite you a little bit. So I'm glad they did away with that completely. This now just gives you crit blow against a unit for the round. So it's a good card. Helps you push extra damage, especially on an enemy you're expecting to hit multiple times. So yeah, it's good. Not as earth shattering, I would say, as the Mother of Dragons cards, but it's good. I don't think Drogo needed much of a boost or anything, so I think that's why this one they didn't mess with it too much. They just kind of took the VP part out of it and left it like that, and it's a good card.
Yeah, sounds good. And another commander's tactic card that was changed is Barristan Selmy. His legendary boldness got changed, and it got a complete rework. It's completely different now. It was giving out panicked before, and also had this risk reward victory point mechanic in where you could gain a victory point, but you could also, if it doesn't work out, give your opponent a victory point. And those cards weren't played a lot. A lot of the times Targaryen players would just throw them out. So this is also a very good change for Barristan, especially since this card, I find this change is really, really good for his playstyle and what he wants to do. It now blocks +2 hits after a friendly unit within long range of Barristan rolls defense dice. So that includes his own unit as well. And also it automatically passes the panic test from this attack. So this gives whatever unit he's in or other units in long range much more sustain, and it's exactly what Barristan lists want to do. It's a bit sad maybe because Barristan had the victory point potential. I kind of liked it because, if you had it on hand, you could play it whenever that unit that you're engaged with got low. But I think this is much better and makes Barristan Selmy a much stronger commander.
Yeah. I agree. So, it's kind of like it's a little bit like a hardened on a stick card. I didn't like the old version because it just felt really clunky and hard to use, and the timing of it just seemed weird of having to end the turn engaged with someone. I'd always find myself holding off and activating Barristan until the very end so I could ensure I could stay engaged. So I think this is a good change. Like you said, it synergizes well with what Barristan wants to do. It gives more defensive options to the Targaryen faction, so you could use this to keep some squishy Dothraki alive. You could even use this to keep a dragon from taking a lot of hits. So it's a great card now. This is one of my favorite of the new changed fourth cards, I think, just because it's blocking hits and passing on panic tests. It's great.
Yeah. Only downside is you don't have Barristan NCU when you take the commander, but this got more attractive now. All right, let's move on. We have some more commanders that got their tactics cards changed. We have Belwas here, who had his count the cuts changed, also a change with the same victory point mechanic. Now, after an enemy completes a melee attack, you target the defender and attach this card to them until they destroy an enemy. And while attached, this unit rolls the highest attack die value and may reroll attack dice. And if it targets Belwas unit, it even gets +1 to morale. So this is a good sustain card that gives a unit a lot of attacking power, even if it's damaged. I think it kind of fits nicely with the theme of Belwas, and lore-wise kind of fits. He has other cards that also do something like this. And I think it's a good change. It doesn't get him doesn't make him too strong, I think. He wasn't picked much. He was a bit weak as a commander, and question is, does it synergize enough so that he can actually be picked more? I do really like the +1 to morale test, because now you can put him in some of the Targaryen units that have not the highest morale, or you could even put him into some neutral units that want to have staying power, something like Blackguards maybe, and you will improve their morale with this. But it's only a tactic card that only works until you destroy something. But then again, if you don't destroy the unit, it just stays on there for a long time and you have that +1 morale. I'll move on to Betrayal here with Jorah, or Jorah's Betrayal card. And that has also been changed. Same victory point mechanic was changed. Now, when a friendly NCU claims a zone, you replace that zone's effect with Draw True Tactics card, restore 3 wounds to Jorah's unit, and 1 enemy combat unit becomes vulnerable and weakened. And then you can attach this card to Jorah's unit until they destroy an enemy, so kind of similar to Count the Cuts. And while it is attached, each time that unit activates, they suffer 1 wound and become panicked. So this one still has a bit of a downside with you taking the wound every time you activate, but it's also really good. Thing is, just before the patch, or let's say in the middle of last season, Jorah's commander was much more popular. There was some lists going around with Jorah commander that were really strong, and that played as a cavalry unit or cavalry list. It played very differently from the Khal Drogo cavalry units. So those Jorah lists were really popular for a while. So it's a bit sad for him, the change, because that betrayal card giving you a victory point maybe in the last round of the game, that won a lot of games with this with these Jorah lists. But I think it's if you have to take those victory point mechanics out, then I think it's a decent change for Betrayal. All right, I think we should move on to the next cards. And there are 3 more commanders who got the slight changes to some of their cards. Randall, why don't you talk about Warcry real quick?
Yeah, so Warcry, this wasn't a massive change, but I think the implications of it are pretty big. So it used to just be that if this was used with Marcelin's unit, then you would get both tokens potentially, but now it's Marcelin's unit or an Unsullied unit.
Yes.
So I think for the first time, really, it's kind of been a long time coming. CMON is adding some actual Unsullied synergy into the game. There really hasn't been any Unsullied synergy at all in Targaryen up until this point. So I think it's great now. We'll see the same thing with Grey Worm's card here in a second, but this now really encourages you to list build in a certain way and amplifies the kind of synergies with the Unsullied. So I'm happy with it. It's not massive, it's not massive power creep or anything for Marcelin, but it's just nice to see more like some actual synergy with Unsullied now.
Yeah, and same with the Retribution of the Dragon card that also just got the change that it can also work on Unsullied units, and it's so refreshing and makes me happy as well, because I really like the Unsullied lore-wise, and I like the minis, and now I want to take them more often because it makes so much sense in the lore, because Marcelin and Grey Worm are Unsullied commanders. And a lot of the time, especially with Targaryens, but also other factions, people have criticized that often the commander that from what happens in the books should be in a certain unit, in his home unit, so to speak, didn't really fit in there. And now it works, at least in the lists. Similar thing happened to Queen's Law. You want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, sure. So Queen's Law was another one of these cards that felt kind of too risky to play. You had to play it on an enemy that attacked you, and then you'd have to destroy that enemy by the end of the round, or you'd give the opponent a VP. So I really never could make this card work very well. Like, the stars just kind of had to align right for the timing to get it right. Now it attaches to an enemy when the enemy activates, and then it causes them to lose all of their abilities during your friendly turn. So the wording on it is a little wonky, and it's a little hard to understand, but it attaches to the enemy unit, and then during your turn, the Targaryen player, they lose their abilities and can't be targeted by friendly tactics cards. So kind of puts a bullseye on that unit for Skahaz or any of his Brazen Beast units.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another new synergy that they're adding in, which is another lore and fluff friendly synergy, because Skahaz was the head honcho of the Brazen Beast. So this really works well in lists for Skahaz or Brazen Beasts. That unit also counts as any of your units. Skahaz or the Brazen Beast will roll a 6 when charging that unit, which has extra synergy with the Brazen Beast because they have Sentinel. So you can get free charges off. So there's just lots of cool combinations, I think, with this new Queen's Law card that open up a lot of really cool plays with Skahaz and the Brazen Beast. So I'm really happy to see this one.
Absolutely. And I think this is one of the cards that, as you said, opens up all these possibilities. Also, the trigger is just, you can always use it when an enemy combat unit activates. And oftentimes the Targ deck was situational, or had situational triggers, and you would just throw them out. And this one you can definitely use when you have it on hand, and it's going to help some unit that wants to charge. And that auto 6 charge is scary as well. So we're back to scary. Yeah. Wow. All right. Let's move on with the next slide, and we're going to talk about those Unsullied, because not just do they have some more synergy now with their house commanders or lore commanders, Grey Worm and Marceline, but they also got a slight buff. What happened here, Randall?
Yeah, so these guys each got a combat prowess ability. So this is a little reminiscent of previous patch where the Queensmen and Kingsmen in Baratheon got something similar about, if your opponent does not control a certain zone, then you get a buff to this unit. So the Unsullied Swords can now heal 1 wound on a morale test if the opponent does not control the swords, and then the pikemen kind of get their own unique version of disrupt when they're engaged with the unit if that unit does not control, or if that player does not control the sword. So one thing that's worth pointing out here is that these abilities would stack with similar abilities. So the Unsullied's what is it called? Their combat prowess resolve, or their combat mastery resolve, excuse me.
Exactly.
It would stack with Dauntless. So if you really want to kind of force in a Dauntless attachment into these guys, you could then heal two points off of a morale test success. So you could force in a Marceline 2-point attachment, or even a Golden Company officer attachment. Dare I mention the
interesting.
The now kind of much nerfed Golden Company officer. So if you really wanted to force that synergy, you could throw an officer in there. When they pass if they pass a panic test, they would heal 2 wounds, and then they would be able to throw a token out with the new boisterous charisma. So it opens up some synergies, not necessarily great synergies. I'm not saying putting a 2-point attachment in them is good, but it gives you some options. But healing one wound off of a past morale test it's not a small thing, especially considering these guys are going to usually pass a morale test or a panic test at a 4+ morale, and they are quite squishy. Both of the Unsullied units are quite squishy if they're not using shield wall,
especially against range. Correct.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
What do you think about the pikes? Since I talked about the morale heal, but the pikes, the pike change is pretty cool, I think, too.
Yeah, I think so. The combat mastery defense was added, didn't get changed in any other way. But this is really cool. I think disrupt is a really good ability in the game itself, often underrated. And now you have something like a disrupt as long as your opponent doesn't control the swords, and that
Mhm.
gives them more sustain. They still, get shredded by something like Golden Company crossbows or something like that. So their range is still their weakness, but there has to be some weakness, and you have your dragons for that, for taking out those ranged units. So I think this is really good and makes them a good bunker for the Mother of Dragons, for example, now, or also the Queen of Marine, maybe. I'm not sure if you would always take pikemen now over Bolton Blackguards, but the pikemen are much faster and now have some more sustain. And yeah, what some people
Yeah.
criticize about the change though is that why is it the sword zones? The sword zone is, it builds up so much momentum for you when you take it in
Hmm.
round 3 or whatever. So tying it to something is kind of weird because your opponent, if he is the starting player or she, then they will take the swords, and Targaryens don't
Yeah,
have much
definitely.
to deny zone claiming or zone controlling. So it's a bit more difficult. But again, putting the pikemen in Daenerys, putting Daenerys in the pikemen makes more sense. And then having her card Promise of Fire could
Hmm.
potentially deny the sword zone, or at least make your opponent pay for it by having the dragons do more damage to a unit. All right. So that was the quick take on the pikemen, and I'm really, really excited to see what people come up with in terms of list building for them. I think there's going to be some cool lists coming up. All right, let's look at the next combat unit that got a change, and that's Jorah, I think. There he is. Jorah got a slight change. You want to talk us through that real quick?
Yeah, so Jorah got a change. The Krokars didn't get a change. I put them on, or they're on here for a kind of a comparison that I'll discuss. But Jorah basically got like the bookkeeping ability innate to him. So I mean, to me, it feels a little bit odd. It's the first time we've seen it added to a solo rider unit. The ability is innate, so it can't be stripped off of him. Extra tactics cards and a bigger hand are always good. This could also stack with the objective that does the same kind of thing. But it just, I don't know, it just feels weird. I don't think you're going to take Jorah now. I don't think this changes the calculus of whether you take him or not. He's still a 4 point unit. He's still vulnerable to being panic bombed or just blown off the table from a few hits. So I think at the end of the day, for 4 points, you still would just take a Hrothgar who has more wounds and can push more damage and has the outflank. So yeah, to me, it's a good change. He got a little bit of a buff, but I don't think it's not really enough for me to consider now throwing Jorah into a bunch of lists. I would just, if I had 4 points, I would just take a Rockar
Yeah,
personally.
yeah, absolutely. Probably what would help him get picked more again would be maybe just a wound more. If he'd be
Hmm.
at 4 wounds, then he wouldn't die to a panic test or Varys
Yeah,
tokens
or yeah,
or
Varys
something.
token. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe they're a bit careful because Jorah was omnipresent in a few patches
Hmm.
ago, and everybody would take him because his scout openings was just really really good for ranged units, veterans and outriders. So maybe they're a bit careful with getting him back and want to try it out and see if people bite with the hand size. A lot of people also say, well, Targaryens have a shit tactic deck, so what do I care if I have another one? I don't know about that. And playing Mother of Dragons, for example, now with a lot of good commander cards, it might
Yeah.
help. But I absolutely agree with you. It doesn't change that he's not being taken that much. Also, I guess if
Hmm.
you take Mother of Dragons, you get him for free as the infantry attachment. So if you
Yeah.
take him as
Exactly.
a solo rider, then you lose more survivability on Daenerys' unit. So yeah, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
kind of hard to find something. But
Yeah, especially after Mother of Dragons got buffed so much in this patch. Like you
mm,
say, you're gonna, if you bring Mother of Dragons, you're like 99% of the time gonna bring Jorah, Jorah the simp version.
Again, you're still
throw
hating.
himself on the.
You're still hating on Jorah. That
Yeah,
grudge.
he's 0 points. He's 0 points, so he can come along.
All right, I get you. All right, so that was the last combat unit, and the wreckers. You already talked about they're more effective maybe, or you take them because of their 6 wounds mainly, right? They will survive that more. They do only have a 6+ defense, but still they're super movable. They can stay on a token. You can outflank them, so yeah, probably you would take them over Jorah just because that one panic test that he fails, and then you lose an activation. You give your opponent a victory point. Of course, the wreckers die quickly as well, but you can protect them more easily than Jorah, I think. All right. Let's move on to the list. We made one list that we wanted to show you, a Season 5 tryout. So this is the list that Randall and I think you should try out. We kind of thought about there's so many different lists that you can make now, but we wanted something that has a lot of the things that changed, and the core change for the Targaryen faction is Mother of Dragons. So we took her. Yeah, and we put her in the pikemen. I think they're a good bunker. I think they are better than the blackguards, because Queen of Marine is often in blackguards, and she synergizes more with them because of horrific visage and her panic stuff and so on. And I think for Daenerys, it's more the pikemen, and you get to try them out as well. The new pikemen with their new combat mastery ability, and we have Jorah in there, which we just talked about, and of course Drogon and Rhaegal, and we picked the Outriders. And why is there a Fortune Seeker in there? Randall. I just want Randall to talk about the list also.
Well, I mean, Fortune Seeker can give you extra attacks, so that's always good. In general, though, I really like the list because throwing Piat Pri in there, along with Daenerys's innate Mother of Dragons ability, really it gives you potentially 4 bites at the apple of any one of her cards. So, let's say you draw Fire Made Flesh in your opening hand, or after grabbing the Tactic Zone, use it on round 2 or something, then you pop her innate ability to pull it back out of the discard pile. Use it again. Use Piat Pri's once per game. Pop it back out of your discard pile. Use it again, and then you still have one in your deck somewhere, or do the same thing with Promise of Fire or Dracarys. So really having Daenerys and Piat Pri in this list gives you so many more opportunities to pull some of those really dangerous cards. And like you were saying, the theme of the Targaryen changes are that some of these changes are really scary. So this gives you a chance to pull more of those scary units out of your deck. And with this list, you've got the dragons torching stuff. You've got the Outriders peppering your enemies with arrows and skipping around the battlefield, and then you've got the pikemen in the middle, kind of holding the line with Daenerys. And with the new changes to her cards, like the Dracarys card being a long range, it's not as much of an issue that Daenerys kind of just bunkers herself a little bit in the middle of the table, because those dragons will be probably in range. Yep. So yeah, this is a great list to let the dragons just run amok.
Yep. And you can, of course, switch some stuff out, but we decided to do this. Also, Zaro in there gives some defense to the dragons, because you can make a unit that charges the dragons lose a rank for the attack dice, basically. And also, if you put Zaro on the backs, he gets another of those tokens, and then you can still shoot with the Outriders. So that's been a synergy that was used last season already. But we thought this would, give a lot of synergies, and you can try a lot of stuff out, draw all those cards that are new and try them out. And you can swap those out. You can swap Piat Pri for something, drop the Fortune Seeker to save a point, and then upgrade Piat Pri to Barristan maybe. But for the sake of trying stuff out, we wanted to use this list. All right. Randall, this was awesome. I had so much fun talking to you, and it made it a tiny bit sweeter that this was on our channel this time. But I'm going to come to your channel anytime again. And do you have any last words on where the faction is now? Maybe just one sentence. Is it better? Is it the same?
It's definitely better. The age of the dragon may be upon us again, for better or worse. We'll see. To the ruin of many a local player who doesn't like getting their units deleted without being able to roll defense dice. So we'll see.
Friendships ruined.
Yep. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm really happy to see all those VP cards go. All of the changed cards were great. So yeah, I'm really happy for the changes.
All right, I agree. So I'm going to say the end words that we always say. I want to say, until we meet again, burn them all, but I'm going to do the proper thing. All right. So thank you, Randall, for being here. And all of you, until we meet again, roll those crits.
Come for the hits and stay for the crits.